I was privileged and had a wonderful experience back in the mid-90s as I attended a demonstration by my friend Alan Batty. Alan is known as one of the premier, most skilled woodturners in the world, and he demonstrated what's become known as his secret box. I actually found a picture of one of Alan's secret boxes on the internet. Now, my version is obviously going to be different. It's going to involve some segmentation. In preparation for this this project, for this segment of the video, I've actually made a couple of these just to see if I could. I'd never made one of these until a few days ago. Now, if you think of a cube, it has 6 sides. Same thing with this sphere. The 6 sides have been decorated with these concentric circles that have been inlaid. The key is one of those black buttons, ebony buttons, pushes the container out, revealing this little storage container with a pop lid. The real key is the plunger that you see here. That's what enables you to reveal the container, but you have to know which one of those black buttons to push on. If you didn't know it was there, you'd pick this up and just think it's a decorated sphere. So to get the project started, I'm going to use some pen blank material, the green stock there. I've also got some purple ones. These are just pen blanks, stabilized material. Creating some rings that I'll use to inlay. I'm also created some ebony rings. These are about 1 3/4 inches in diameter. I need about 1.5 inch diameter for my actual rings. The glue job's the same kind of thing I've shown in the past, using rubber bands. Not using the half ring technique, but I can toss one of these and replace it pretty easily if I find a defect. So while those rings are drying, I'll proceed to create some jam chucks for my spheres. These will require 4 layers of MDF per sphere, 3 of them for the jam and 1 for the keeper ring. Plenty of glue, and the use of some spring clamps completes this job. For my spheres, I've got some hard maple. I've had this for a long time, but I am checking the moisture, and it's in the 6-7% range. I've got 2 sizes here prepared on the table saw. The large diameter material will be for the spheres, and the smaller sticks here will be for the containers inside. I need to determine the center, at least on one end. These will be lathe mounted with the live center on one end and the chuck on the other end. So the first step in creating the spheres is to get these cylinders turned nice and round, smooth, taking a minimum amount of wood off. I want to maintain the largest diameter I can out of these cylinders of wood. It doesn't really matter what tool you use, but I need to get a nice smooth cylinder. Here I'm putting a small tenon on one end so I can reverse mount this around and clean up the other end. Once I've got a clean, smooth cylinder with a consistent diameter, I've measured the diameter, I've ended up with something just under 2.6 inches. My chore now is to create a template, a piece of wood with an inside diameter that perfectly matches that cylinder. In this case, it was like 2.57. But I'll do a little, turning and testing and checking, and until I can get that right on the money, the same diameter. Using a parting tool, I'll take this little piece of MDF off. Now I've got a tool that I can use to gauge my sphere as I turn it. I'll need a half piece, and one of these half pieces I'll actually break off a little piece, because in some cases I'll need a shorter template. I'm ready to start working on my spheres now. So now I'm back at the lathe. First thing I want to do is mark the center of the sphere. In this case, it's just a smidgen over 1.25 inches. I do not want to remove any wood where that pencil mark is. A little trimming, a lot of checking with that template back and forth. This is a very time-consuming procedure. You cannot rush this. Trim a little, check frequently, and my goal is to get a perfect dome end on the end of this cylinder. Once I've achieved that, then I'll mark the length of this. I'll check the diameter against the length, put a mark here.
and part this off. My goal, again, I want a chunk of wood whose diameter and length match. Now using a parting tool, I'm taking this off. That'll leave me a cylinder that I can repeat the process and create another one of these half-turned spheres. Like I said, this is just a repeat of the previous process. Now my stacks of MDF discs for my jam chucks, the glue's cured. Time to put a faceplate on these. Pretty simple process there. Don't forget to countersink these holes. Prevent that MDF from bulging, give you a better fit. Here I'm just truing it up so it runs true. Now it's smooth. I've got a 2-inch Forstner bit going in about 1.5 inches through 2 layers of MDF. It's just quicker and faster than turning. But now I'm going to enlarge the opening just a little bit. I want my sphere to not go in too deep. The equator of the sphere should stay a good 1/8 to 1/4 inch outside of the jam. To hold my sphere into the jam, at least at this stage, I've used the live cone center, carefully positioned it so this is running nice and true, and now it's just a matter of doing the same turning procedure on the other side of this piece of wood. If this piece of wood has the same length as diameter, and I put matching perfect domes on both ends, I should be pretty close to a perfect sphere, or at least close enough for these purposes. You cannot get too aggressive. It's a lot of turn, stop, check over and over. If you get too aggressive and take too much wood someplace, you've kind of got to start all over and remove wood everywhere to get that perfect sphere. To further improve the sphere, I'm determining the center point between the two ends. I'll use this point with my tailstock to remount the sphere. Do just a little bit of very, very light shear scraping just to further improve that surface. Then I can take it out, determine the other side center point, do the same thing again. Now I need to build a keeper ring to hold those spheres into the jam. The 4th piece of MDF clamped on, 3 holes drilled. Make sure you mark them so you can put them back the same way. Enlarging the holes for the screws, screwing this onto the jam, going to the lathe, opening up a hole. Here's the same 2-inch Forstner bit. And then I'll use some scrapers, true up the outside here, remove wood on the inside. Actually, it's MDF. It's important to enlarge that opening like I just did there. That gives me better access to my sphere once it's pinched in place. I'm doing a little undercut here. The diameter dimension of the keeper ring is pretty important. I want to be able to pinch the sphere into place with a minimum gap between the keeper ring and the jam. That's too big a gap. I want something close to 1/4 inch. So it's a little work to get those dimensions just right. Now I can start working on the actual box. I've indicated the 2 ends of the sphere where the end grain is. That's important. I want this box to be oriented with the grain. Locking it in place with the keeper ring, centered with my tailstock. It's real important that this be snug. You do not want that sphere to slip at any time during the next procedures. I've replaced the 2-inch bit now with an 1 3/8 Forstner bit, and I've got a depth stop indicator of this tape at about 1.7 inches. If you go much deeper than that, you run the risk of going all the way through. You don't want to do that. Now I've put a brad point bit. This bit just happens to be just under 1/2 inch. I used that size because I knew it was a fresh, sharp bit. Be careful exiting, go slow so you can avoid tear out, and then continue all the way through the MDF. That's important so you have access from the other side with a knockout bar later on. Now I'll take these surfaces and clean them up. Get rid of all the drill bit evidence. I'm just using a variety of tools here. The exit hole I'm going to put a tiny taper on, keeping the far end small. That'll just make the insertion a little bit easier. I can turn this in both directions if I have a little problem with tear out. I'll sand it up to 320 and get ready for the next step.
To help you better understand what I've done inside here, let me show you a little diagram.
So I drilled the main hole, being very careful to leave enough wood in this corner right here. Got about 3/8 of an inch of thickness there, which I'll need later on. And of course the small hole here. The main hole is 1 3/8 inches in diameter, and then the small hole just under 1/2 inch. I used that bit just because it was a fresh, sharp bit. Then I came in with my lathe tools, smoothed up the edges, put a little tapered bottom in this, rounded that corner, and put a tiny taper on the exit hole, leaving the very end or outside of that hole as small as it was drilled. For the inside containers, I've prepared these blocks of maple. They're about 2 by 2 inches, almost 3 inches long. With hindsight, they didn't need to be quite that long. Little smoothing. I'm using an 1 1/8 bit here, and I'm going to drill about 1.2 inches in depth. Now I'm just going to remove a little more wood on the outside, and then go to the inside with my lathe tools to remove any evidence that a drill bit was ever there, getting nice smooth surfaces, and particularly getting rid of that sharp corner of the bottom inside corner. I'm creating just a little bit of a shallow rounded bottom to this, and then sanding everything I can get my fingertip on up to about 320. So the next step is to reverse this so I can dimension the outside of my box to perfectly fit the inside of the sphere. To do that, I'm creating an internal jam chuck that'll fit the inside of that container that I've just sanded. I'm carefully sneaking up on a perfect fit. Not that perfect. I actually have some tape there, which is an advantage. The advantage of the tape is when I finish my turning, I'll be able to more easily separate these two. Without the tape, there can be an awful strong connection, and it can be very difficult to pull this off. And it's going to have very thin walls. The wall thickness is going to be somewhere around 1/8 of an inch or less. That 1/8 of an inch will be fairly fragile, so I don't want to have to really struggle to pull it off when I finish. I don't need that maple in the end, so I got rid of that. And I'm just slowly sneaking up on a perfect fit of this outside diameters to the inside of my sphere. Calipers will help get me close, but as I get closer and closer, I'll start doing a physical comparison. I'll hold the sphere up and check my fit and go slow and easy. But before I get to that final fit up, I need to add a piece of ebony to the maple, the piece that's going to be exposed on the outside of the sphere. I've drilled a hole here, 7/32 of an inch, about a little less than 1/2 inch in depth. Now I'll prepare a piece of ebony to go on there. This is an in-grain to in-grain joint, that's why I drilled the hole, and I'll shape a little tenon here, make a much, much stronger joint. This is just a test hole using the same drill bit, so I can sneak up on this dimension and get it to fit just right. Can't get too aggressive here because I want a fairly snug fit. I want just enough room in there for glue to exist. Once I've got it dimensioned right, I can part this off. Plenty of glue, making sure the glue is spread to all the surfaces, and then just some minimal pressure using the tailstock. I'll put this aside now for at least 20 or 30 minutes, work on something else. Then I'll put it back on and do this final fit up. Here we are. It's still pretty tight, won't go in. It's a little removal followed by a check. Stop, check, turn a little, stop, check, over and over and over. If you take too much off, you can't put it back on. We're talking thousandths of an inch probably to get the right fit. It's got to be snug, but yet it has to be able to slide in and out of there. You can't get too aggressive. Here's another test hole. This will just allow me to independently check this little ebony end. Same drill bit was used, obviously, as the hole through the sphere. Again, a little removal, stop, check, over and over. It's tedious to watch this. You can imagine what it's like to do in person. A little more removal. Just getting ever so close, but yet trying to make sure I don't go too far. Getting very close now. The end here looks good. Perhaps a little shear scraping. It's even closer. The final removal I'll try to do with sandpaper here. I've started with 180 and I'll sand it up through 400. And voila, we've got it all the way seated. I'm checking with a flashlight through that bottom hole, making sure the ebony comes all the way through the bottom. To get my container off that jam, this rubber pad really comes in handy, gives me a good grip. Next, I need to cut a recess, a place for the lid to that container to seat itself into the sphere. This is about 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch, approximately. I next need to trim the tops of these containers to be flush with that recess that I cut. I need to tighten up the fit, so I've used some tape. The blue tape so it'll come off easy, the masking tape so the blue tape won't stain the inside of my sphere. Now I'll just trim off the end of this, first with a parting tool and then with my little diamond pointed scraper. Notice here I'm turning in reverse. That just gives me a better view. That's an option you always have with most lathes. To remove the container, I use a knockout bar from the other side. Remember the hole that was drilled all the way through the jam chuck? This is a particularly long lesson, so I'm suggesting you should take a little break before proceeding.